No. Hi guys, I'm Amy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with all of you some books that I think are perfect to read in the springtime. As it is currently spring, and here in the Pacific Northwest, we are finally enjoying some really awesome spring weather. The sprinklers are going, the lawnmowers are going, flowers are being planted, and I am here for all of it. Some of these books, probably all of these books really, because I've wrapped up a lot of them on my channel, you've heard me chat about before. Others you've heard me talk about more than once, but that's just because I love them so very much. But if you are looking for some books that'll just help wrap you up in the season of spring, then go ahead and keep on watching. The first book I wanted to chat about is Joy in the Morning by Betty Smith. This is a story about a young couple who gets married. I believe he's in college and she just turned 18, and they decide to get married and run away, and it's just about their first year being together as a married couple. And I think the reason that this is perfect for spring is the sense that it's just all new to them. They've loved each other, but they're young and they don't really know how marriage works, and it's about them learning and growing together. And if you like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, obviously this is Betty Smith, you should like this as well, but I think it's really a beautiful portrait of what a first year of marriage can look like. The second book I'm going to recommend is Someone by Alice McDermott. I believe this book was included on my favorite books of, it would have been 2017, which was my first year on BookTube. And in this story, I just forgot her name, Marie, who is growing up in post-depression Brooklyn, and we basically see the entirety of her life. We see it in different glimpses. We go back and forth in time. We follow her relationships, her jobs, specifically the job in which she worked at a funeral home, her being a mother, her aging, and it's just a really beautiful story. It's about her coming into her own and continuing to do so throughout her life. If you liked A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I definitely think that you would like this one, and it's significantly shorter, and it's really, really a beautifully told story. I also have a nonfiction pick that I guess technically you could think of as self-help, but I don't think it's perfectly labeled into self-help. But that is Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. And this is just really about Gilbert's process of being creative and how she views the creative process and the way that ideas come to us and leave us, and how to just really accept yourself for who you are, especially in your ability to be a creator. I absolutely devoured this book. I really appreciated her point of view, and as you know, I really do enjoy her stories, and it's a really, really good book that I think if self-help makes you nervous, that this is a good one to start with, because it just is really like having a chat with a friend in the best possible way. I also decided to include a middle grade book that I recently read and wrapped up in my most recent reading wrap-up. That was quite the tongue twister / mouthful. And that is Nightbird by Alice Hoffman. In this story, we were following a little girl named Twig, who her mother chooses to isolate the two of them from the small town / community that they live in the country, because her and her mom are keeping a secret from everyone else. And when a family moves into the cottage, basically on the same property that they live in, Twig kind of befriends these two girls, specifically the one that's her age, and then gets to know that little girl's older sister as well. And it's, again, about growing into your own and finding your own voice, which is just something that I really associate with spring, because it's hopeful and it's new, and spring has always been hopeful and new to me, which I feel a lot of people probably relate to in most cases. And for a book that I have only continued to rave about since I read it last summer, and will continue to rave about because it's that good and not enough people are reading it, in my opinion, and that is The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Soon-Mi Wong, and translated from the Korean by Chi Young Kim. This is a story about an egg-laying hen named Sprout who escapes her coop in order to pursue her dream of finally becoming a mother, of hatching her own egg. And you will find, the air just turned off, you probably noticed that, apologies. You will find every aspect of humanity in this book that is all about farm animals and the animals surrounding the farm. And I'm just gonna leave it at that, but it's a teeny tiny book, so even if you're like, oh, I don't know, you should pick it up anyway, because you can read it in a single sitting. But it has gorgeous illustrations in it, and I like annotated the crud out of it because there's just a lot packed into this teeny tiny book. And I also wanted to include a classic that I don't think gets talked about enough, because this is a classic that I personally really enjoy, and it's not one of the more popular works, I would say, of this author. And I can't remember exactly if we see all the seasons in this book. I want to say we do, but there's a specific reason why I selected this one. And let me just like hold off a little bit longer before I tell you what the book actually is. And that is Persuasion by Jane Austen. And in this story, we are following Anne Elliot. And she is the daughter of Sir Walter Elliot, who thinks very highly of himself, as does her older sister. But Anne is quite the opposite of them. She's a very humble person. She's a very modest, warm, quiet person. And for that reason, that's why I think this book is perfect to read in the spring, because Anne is just such a calming, peaceful character. And I think in a lot of ways, spring can be very calming for us, because winters tend to be harsh and summers tend to be hot. And spring is the time where there's just beautiful things happening and we can sit down and appreciate them. And I think we can appreciate Anne Elliot as a character. She is so much more, shall we say, mild compared to a lot of the characters that Austen writes about, but in no way is she weak. And I think some people may interpret her that way, but I think that's inaccurate, because I think Anne is in actuality very strong and one of the strongest characters that Austen's written. This is just about Anne's experience with all the people that she meets in her life. It's typical Austen in that sense, but I really recommend it. And if you thought I wasn't going to mention this book, shame on you, because this is another book in which it was one of my favorite books of 2018, and I've also mentioned this author in this video already. Any guesses? Let me know in the comments if you guessed it, because I'm sure some of you will. And that is The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. Y'all know what the story's about. I've talked about it enough because I have raved and raved and raved. Again, we see all the different seasons in this book, but this book is about growth. It is about, I forgot her name, that's terrible, Alma Whitaker and her growing up. Literally, we learn about the day she's born and we go until the day she dies, and it's about everything she's experiencing. And there's a huge connection with nature in this book and her studies with nature and watching the slow progression of things and the fact that things constantly change and are constantly new. We're back to that word, new, associated with spring, hence the spring recommendation. I think you can read this book at any time. I read this in the middle of the summer and really enjoyed it, but if I could pick again, I would definitely pick the spring, and I'm sure at some point in time in my life, I will be rereading this book in the spring. Go read it, guys. It's that good. It's really good. It's really good. And the last of my nonfiction picks, which is a book that when I started reading it, I thought that it was fiction. It's not, it's nonfiction. This was a book my sister-in-law gave to me for Christmas several years back, and it's just a wonderfully heartwarming, happy story that involves Paris. What more could you want? And that is Paris Letters, One Woman's Journey from the Fast Lane to a Slow Stroll in Paris by Janice MacLeod. And Janice was living in the States, I believe, and she was working as for a marketing company, creating like spam, like mail that you get in your mailbox that nobody wants to see. And she's just really unhappy with her life. She doesn't treat herself well. She doesn't spend time with good men. She just is fed up. And so she spends a year saving up all of her money, using all of her art supplies, and then quits her job and decides to spend 9 months in Europe. The first 3 months happen in Paris, and this is her journey. And she starts this business called Paris Letters, in which you could subscribe. She started, I think she had an Etsy store, and she will send you letters that include her own watercolor illustrations. I love watercolor. Some of you may know that, but this is just a really happy book that just, it makes you feel good. There is romance in it, so I'm going to warn you about that, but it's adorable and wonderful, and the illustrations are beautiful, and it's just a very very sweet story. And the last and final book that I wanted to mention to you is one that some of you might find a little bit obscure, but this is a book that I have read over and over and over again, but not recently, which I really should get around to doing because this book has a special place in my heart. And that is Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne and illustrated by Shepherd. Oh, I always forget his name. Oh, E.H. Shepherd. This is a really beautiful edition that my mom gave to my family in, oh, she didn't date it, shoot. So it's very special to me, and it's the full collections and Loki Modified, so it's just a very heartwarming book. But if you haven't read Winnie the Pooh and you're just kind of dismissing it, I think you're missing out. There are so many sweet messages in this book, and I think as an adult you can get something out of it, and if you have children, you should be reading it to them because there's just something really heartwarming about the 100 Acre Woods and their relationships and their mishaps, and if you haven't read it, you should make time. Alrighty guys, there you have it. There are some books that I think you should read this spring or save for next spring, or just really prioritize because they're that good. But if there are any books you think I should try and get to this spring, the little bit that we have remaining, please let me know. I'm always up for recommendations, and if you read any of these books, let me know your thoughts as well. You know the drill. So if you guys like this video, please like it, and if you loved it, please subscribe, and we will see you in my next video. Happy reading! And I also decided. Sounds like that should be a word. But it's not. It's probably not. Please tell me it's not. That wasn't too terrible. I had a lot of bloopers and we're under 15 minutes. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, wow.